anybody would like the recording afterwards, just let me know. Thank you for joining us today for our monthly In the Trenches webcast. Our topic this month is all about portfolio analysis, and Aaron Harkleroad will be our presenter.
Hello, everyone.
And just so you know, we would love to connect with you. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and we do have a Quick PMO group. If you would like to join, just let me know. I would be happy to invite you to join our Quick PMO group where we talk about all things project management, Project Server, Project Online, and Quick PMO and all of vibrofusion's products. So our agenda for today is what is in the trenches, and then we're going to talk a little bit about vibrofusion and our services, and then Aaron will do the demo. Then we'll talk again about more in depth on our solutions and services if we have time, and then we'll talk about next steps. Okay, in the trenches, we came up with this and to basically highlight one area of project management that companies have challenges with. So every month we pick a new topic and we basically dissect it. We talk about challenges that customers have had in the past that we have worked with, and the reason for those challenges and the solutions that we come up with. So we have these topics all the way out until August, and we will be reaching out to everyone to see if there are topics that that you would be interested that we haven't covered. So look for that in the future. And of course, we end it talking about the successes that our customers have had with these solutions. And here is a little slide about Aaron Harkleroad. Just know that he's awesome, and you will enjoy the presentation. That's all I got to say.
Thanks.
And just to highlight very briefly some of our solutions and our services. Of course, Quick PMO is our pre-configured project server solution. Some of you have already seen demos. If you haven't, you can request a demo. We would love to show you and your PMO team Quick PMO. And we also have other versions of Quick PMO. We have Quick PMO Lite, Quick PMO for Agile. And we also have Quick Packs, which are pre-built report packs that you can purchase separately. And we just launched a new product called Canvas, which is a SharePoint app that lets you build reports without knowing code, which is really awesome. And we could demo that for you as well. Now, some of our services, of course, we are a Microsoft partner, all things Project Server. So we can do full-blown Project Server implementations, Project Online implementations. Some of the other really neat services that we offer are project schedulers. Project schedulers are basically staffing. So if you have project managers that are managing multiple projects and they cannot keep up with their scheduling, you can ask us to provide you with a scheduler that can help maybe 3 or 4 of your project managers manage their schedules. I'll be happy to provide more information on that at the end. And the other interesting thing that we offer is support. We have Project Server support, and this is something that is very unique. Most partners do not offer real-time support. We offer real-time support with a support team that that will provide you support for Project Server, Microsoft Project, more IT-driven, more end-user-driven. So if you want more information on that, please let me know. And we also offer workshops. So if you wanted to just basically analyze your projects and your portfolios, we have different workshops to meet those needs. So enough about the selling. Aaron, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, so what you're going to see primarily in the demo today, I'm going to kind of take you through soup to nuts, the portfolio analysis feature of Project Server and Project Online. So if you ever heard the phrase, project management is about doing projects right, and Project Online gives you the tools for doing that. Portfolio analysis is about doing the right projects. So it gives you the ability to select which projects align very closely with your organization goals, and it also gives you some visibility into if you're looking at a bucket of proposals or a group of projects that you would like to do in in a particular time horizon or in the near future. It's going to give you visibility into whether or not you actually have the staff, you have the resources, you have enough people in your resource pool to take on those projects. So the customer challenge really that we're addressing today is, a lot of people just kind of struggle getting started with it. So they perceive it as a, very complex beast within Project Server or Project Online. And, hopefully I'll kind of do my best to disavow that notion today and show you that it is relatively straightforward to get going with portfolio analysis. You can do the analysis of all of your projects in the portfolio if you want to see, how your projects rank against every other project in the portfolio, or, and this is oftentimes a better way to kind of get off the ground and get started, you can do it one business unit at a time. So perhaps analyze the projects within one particular business unit's portfolio and then move on to other areas of the business. So without further ado, I'm just going to bounce over to my demo environment. So I am in a Project Online. Project Online is Project Server 2013, hosted in Microsoft's cloud. If you have Project Server implemented in your own data center, we call that an on-premises solution. The capabilities of portfolio analysis are identical, whether you are in Project Online or whether you're in Project Server in an on-premises deployment. Okay, so not going to see a lot of different areas of Project Server today, just those that are kind of specifically relevant towards the portfolio analysis piece. So, a couple things I want to just bounce into briefly. If I navigate into the Project Center, those of you that are familiar with Project Server, this is where the projects themselves live, the portfolio of projects. I have different views that I can select in here so that I can see whichever projects I have security access to see. And I can see different details on them. For instance, here's a view where we're grouping them by the phase of their project lifecycle, so I can see which projects are in initiating, which ones are in executing, etc. If I wanted to focus on maybe like budget or cost metrics, I can have different views that do let me slice and dice projects based on different fields, or set filters on different fields. Okay, so these are the projects that you're going to see me perform a portfolio analysis against. We also have, there is a link on the home page that takes us to the Resource Center. And when you go into the Resource Center, that also comes into play with the portfolio analysis. And in the Resource Center is where I can take a look not only at my resources and at their settings, but also I can run some capacity analysis and see what assignments people have on their plate, what availability they have. So I'll just kind of very quickly come in here, select a couple people, and I'll show you what those capabilities look like. This is going to come into play when I do a portfolio analysis if I pull projects in that are going to need certain types of resources. So if I need developers and I need analysts and I need procurement people, it's going to take into consideration the people in my resource pool that are aligned with those different roles and what their availability is over the time frame that I'm analyzing the portfolio. So, with that, I'm going to bounce into the area where all the portfolio analysis pieces live. So down in the quick launch area, the section of links on the left-hand side, those that are grouped under strategy, this is where we set the building blocks up for portfolio analysis. And where we generally start is in the driver library. So the first thing we have to define is what are they're called business drivers, but essentially they're the organization goals that we're going to define that we can score our projects against. So for instance, give you an example of some of the sample ones that come, expanding into new markets and segments. So if that is a business driver, that's a goal that we do want to measure our projects against, what we have to do is we have to go in and define this. So if I click on it, it'll show us how we can define these business drivers. So one thing you can do is you can isolate drivers to specific departments. That's particularly useful. Like an example would be if you have some drivers that are measuring a very HR specific goal like employee retention. you might not necessarily want to use that driver in every analysis. You might want to use that driver specifically in the analysis that you perform against HR-related projects. If you're building a new piece of software or you have a marketing campaign coming up, that might not have a whole lot of impact on, say, employee satisfaction. So using the department filter is a way you can align your drivers to specific projects and also to specific analyses. And when you define the driver, you have a score rating that goes from no impact down to extreme impact. And what you are able to do, these drivers that come as samples, they all come with blank values in here. So you get to specify what would a low score in this particular driver be? What would a moderate score be? What would a strong score be? So for instance, in a driver such as this one, expanding into new markets and segments, if you're a large multi-billion-dollar industry, you're going to have some, pretty high numbers in here to indicate that a project is going to help us, expanding into those new markets. Moderate score might be between, $500,000 and $1 million. Strong might be, $1 million to $3 million. Anything over $3 million would rank as an extreme project in helping us expand into new markets. Small company, you'd probably have much smaller dollar figures in there. So those are the definitions of the drivers themselves. If you need to build a new driver, then you come into the driver library, you click new, you put a name in for the driver. You'll see the screen in a second here. Specify which departments are going to utilize this driver, and then, like I said, you fill in the criteria for what constitutes a low, moderate, strong, and extreme score in that driver. And then once you have your drivers done, okay, you're able to proceed with the analysis itself.
Aaron, how many drivers should an organization have?
Good question. So the number of drivers, an organization may have a lot of drivers that they would define that they want to use for different portfolio analyses. But what you're going to see coming up shortly here, when I actually do an analysis, I have to select something that's called a prioritization model. And in any one prioritization model, you probably want to limit the drivers that you use to somewhere between like 5 and 8, 6 and 8, something like that. If you get too many drivers in a single analysis, what's going to happen is it's going to kind of flatten out the distinction of projects and how they score against those drivers. So if we're scoring against 50 drivers, there might be like a 0.01% difference between one project and the next as it pertains to those. If we're scoring against 5 or 6 or 8 drivers, it's going to be a more distinct alignment of project priority, which you'll see in the analysis itself. So once we get the drivers built and we have our driver library, we're able to proceed into building a prioritization model. And if I click on driver prioritizations, you'll see that I do already have several in here. When you build a new one, I'll just take you through a new one part of the way, and then I'll show you, some of the existing ones that we have. So if I'm building a prioritization that I'm going to use for, let's say, measuring, marketing-specific projects, I can call this one the marketing prioritization. Okay, and I might want to select the sales and marketing department, so that I'm using drivers that are specific to that department and projects that are specific to that department. Then the next thing I do is I select which of these drivers are going to be relevant to doing a marketing prioritization. Does marketing care about improving product quality? Maybe not so much, so I might not select that one. Are they going to care about increasing market share in existing markets? Absolutely. Are they going to care about expanding into new markets? Absolutely. Improving customer satisfaction? Probably. So you select whichever drivers are going to be relevant to your prioritization model, and then the next thing you do is you determine whether you're going to manually rank these drivers. So I might say they're all even, and I give them all the same weight, 33.3% each. Or I can go with a calculation here, and I can basically go through a little comparison series where I rank each driver against the remaining drivers. So I can say expanding into new markets is about the same as increasing market share, but it's definitely more important than improving customer satisfaction. And I would step through this until I've compared every driver in my selection against every other driver. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to close out of this one and I'm going to take you into one that was already built just to save a little bit of time in today's demo. I have this pre-built one called Executive Consensus. I'm going to go into the Executive Consensus. Okay. And I'm going to show you that here are the drivers that have been selected So increasing market share, expanding into new markets, improving product quality. And here's how they rank. Basically, here are the weights that are assigned to each of these drivers. So if a project ranks very well, scores very well, against increasing market share in existing markets, it's going to get a big boost in the portfolio analysis. If a project scores very well against improving employee satisfaction, it's not going to get much of a boost on that because it has a relatively low priority in the overall scheme of things here. Okay.
And where do we go to score our projects against these drivers?
Okay. So you're seeing all the building blocks of the portfolio analysis itself, but where you would actually score a particular project against these drivers, you'd have to be in the details of said project. So let me just exit out of here for a second, and I'm going to navigate back to the Project Center. And there is a specific, it's called a project details page, or a PDP. And it's called Strategic Impact Statement. So it's an out-of-the-box page that essentially shows you whichever drivers have been configured for the department that's aligned with the project you're looking at right now. So if I go into Sales and Marketing and I select, let's say, this Acquisition Target Analysis project, by clicking on it here in the Project Center, it's going to take me into the details of that project. Okay, and if there is a workflow, it might show me where I am in the workflow of the project. I can show the schedule of the project, but again, in particular, what we're talking about here is the strategic impact driver page. And here's where an individual could go in and edit the project and score this project against these individual drivers.
Yeah, now who can do this? This isn't open to everybody, is it?
Yeah, no. So not just anybody can go in here and edit the score of this project against the drivers. Typically, it's done by the project owner, but it can be controlled through permissions. So, you could create a custom group inside here, and, maybe it's a couple folks within the PMO that, that fill this information in. Also, I would strongly recommend, and this is something that we discuss with a lot of our clients, workflows to govern projects through their life cycle are a very important component of this, because what you can do with a workflow is you can specify that this strategic impact statement, it might not show up on a brand new project because we might have to do a little bit of legwork before we get to the point where we're actually ready to analyze that project against others in the portfolio. But as we progress maybe to, say, for instance, a select phase in our governance lifecycle, then it might be the appropriate time to show the strategic impact statement. And then later on, when we get to other phases in our project lifecycle, like, if we're in the closure gate, or maybe even if we're in execution, what you're able to do through the workflow settings is you're able to actually lock down that strategic impact statement. So after a certain point in time, people can no longer edit the score of the project against those drivers. So you can really govern who can make those changes and when they can make those changes via a governance workflow. If you don't use a governance workflow with your projects, then what's going to happen is the strategic impact statement, it'll show up as soon as the project is created, and you can't configure it to be read-only or read-write. It's going to be read-write throughout the duration of the project. So, okay. So now that we've talked a little bit about the drivers themselves, and hopefully you understand you have to have a library of drivers that are going to measure your project against the different organization goals. You have built at least one or more prioritizations. In any single analysis, you can only use one prioritization. But the reason you may have multiple prioritizations is you may do a portfolio analysis specifically to a marketing bucket of projects, vis-a-vis a marketing portfolio. Or you might do an analysis that's maybe more operations focused, COO, okay, or maybe financially focused, CFO. So different prioritizations that can be used in different analyses so that you get, you get a different perspective of how the projects rank against each other. All right, so now in actually creating an analysis, I navigate down to the portfolio analysis link here. And over time, you may collect and have multiple analyses in here that you can view and and kind of take a look at how projects are prioritized from one time period to the next. So a lot of organizations might do an analysis quarterly, They might do an analysis, bi-weekly. Kind of depends on how often they're intaking new projects. Yeah, if you don't have a lot of new projects coming into the system very frequently, then you probably just have to do an analysis, maybe quarterly. And see, okay, we have a couple new projects coming into the pipeline, so let's run the analysis for the next 8 quarters, and let's see how might they impact our resource pool, and how might they impact our other projects which are ongoing. So if we take on these projects, do we have enough people to do them? And does it have a large impact on our budget, small impact on our budget? So those are all the pieces that you're going to see in a little bit here. So to set up a new portfolio analysis, come up in the ribbon here, and I click New. And I generally recommend that you create a naming scheme, come up with a naming convention in here. So, something like maybe FY 2015 or 16 if you're in fiscal year 2015 or 2016. And then if you're going to do several analyses within each year, maybe FY 2015 analysis for Q1. Okay, so whatever you come up with, definitely follow a naming convention here so that you know exactly what you're looking at when you pull up a portfolio analysis. This is a demo, so I'm going to call mine demo 042915. That's today's date. All right. Description's optional. Yeah, I'd encourage people to put a description in on a real one, but I'm going to skip that for this one. Departments, I'm not going to select because I actually do want to choose projects across all departments. I don't want to focus this demo on just finance projects or just sales and marketing projects. So you're going to see a mix of projects that I select here across different departments within my organization. Okay, in an analysis, I do have to select a prioritization. I can't do multiples. So again, a minute ago when I was showing you what the prioritizations themselves are and the fact that I had several ones, a CIO, a COO, an executive consensus, here's where I can actually select the prioritization itself. So executive consensus. All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to, on a second screen, on a second tab, I'm also going to open up, just so I can kind of bounce back and forth between the analysis that I'm building here and the components that I'm using in the analysis, in this case the prioritization. Okay, so just want to kind of review what's important in that executive consensus. So if I, on the second tab here, I go back to my prioritizations and I select that executive consensus. Okay. The driver that's most important, again, increasing market share in existing markets. Expanding into new markets, also pretty important, ranks secondly. Then there's a bit of a drop. Improving product quality, so ranks third, but definitely market share. Expanding in existing markets and moving into new markets, that's what's the major focus in that executive consensus prioritization is. Not that we don't want to keep our employees happy, but, all things considered, relative to the other drivers, that's the least important driver. Of course, you have to keep your employees happy. If you lose all your employees, then, none of the projects are going to be able to take flight, but...
We've included them on the list, so they are important.
Exactly. So it is important, it's just, the least relative to the other ones. Right. And again, the way this breakdown here was derived was... we went through an exercise. I didn't say just manually put in those figures. We went through the exercise of saying, okay, expanding into new markets and segments, much more important than customer sat, much more important than employee sat, et cetera, et cetera. And this was stepped through one by one by one until there were no drivers left. Okay, so as you go from one screen to the next, you're going to have fewer drivers to compare against each other, until you get to the screen where you've compared the last two drivers against each other. And then that is what culminates in this breakdown here of highest priority to lowest priority driver. Plus there's this nice little thing underneath here. I mean, in my opinion, it should just automatically be expanded out so you see that, but you want to make sure that you have a high consistent ratio, something at hopefully in the 90 percentile or higher. What that means is you were consistent in how you ranked these drivers against each other. In other words, you didn't say something like A is greater than B and B is greater than C, but A and C are equal. That wouldn't be mathematically consistent. Okay, so when you get a lot of drivers, and once you get up to say 6, 7, 8, 9 drivers, it gets a little bit more challenging to keep a high consistency ratio, but you're going to want to make sure that you do have that high consistency ratio. So anyway, back to my analysis itself. So I'm building this new analysis. I'm using that executive consensus. And now I have to select which projects I'm going to pull into this particular analysis. Okay, so when you come in here, you might use different criteria. Like maybe you want to pull all projects that are in a particular workflow stage, like the define stage, or if you have a stage gate that's used specifically for portfolio analysis, you can do that. Or maybe you want to pull in projects that are of a particular department. Okay, so I can't apply a filter here, but I can sort on these columns, and I can say, okay, here's where I could just grab all of the finance projects. So highlight all of them. Whenever you have your projects selected, you use the arrow buttons here to move them from the available window over to the selected window.
Can you create views to filter which projects you're selecting for the analysis?
Yeah, so out of the box, you're going to get one view here called Summary, which has a few columns: the project name, the workflow stage, okay, the project type, the project departments. But you can create other views in the PWA settings, or at least an administrator can do that. And then in the drop down here, you can use these other views. So for instance, if I wanted to see just projects that are in the select stage of my workflow, I have a view that applies that filter, and I can see that there's just 2 projects that are at that point. Okay? Or I might use something a little simpler, and I might have a custom field that's a flag field that just says whether a project is ready for analysis or not. And I have a view that exposes that column. So I'm going to select that view, and I can see the list of projects that are ready for analysis, and then eventually I get down to the dividing line and the list of projects that are not yet ready for analysis. So of course, I'm going to choose the first one in the list that is ready for analysis, go down to the last one, shift click, grab all of those, use the little arrow thing here, and then throw them over to selected projects. So however many that is, I'm going to guess it's about 20 some odd projects. I click OK. And tells me right here that was 25 projects. So I'm including 25 projects in this particular analysis. Okay, now when you analyze projects, it's going to give you a breakdown of these projects in terms of how they score against your driver. So the highest priority project all the way down to the lowest priority project. And what you're able to do is you're able to do some what if analysis on sort of like two different dimensions, if you will, here. One dimension is based on budget or based on cost. So you have to have a budget or a cost field that you use. Okay? You can pull multiple ones in, but when you're initially setting it up here, you have to select one. So what field best represents the total cost or the total budget of that project? And I have a field in here called total cost. Okay? And then that second dimension, if you want to do some what if analysis, would be do we actually have enough resources to do these 25 projects that we're looking at? And if not, could we maybe move them around in terms of their start dates? Could we bring on some new resources, stuff like that? So that would be the other dimension that you can kind of analyze and perform what if analysis against these projects. So in order to do that, I have to check this box, analyze the time phase resource requirements, and then I can define the bottom half of my screen here. Okay, so I'm going to start my planning horizon. Now, I'm going to go back in time to the first quarter of 2013. I mean, normally you wouldn't go back very far, if at all, but I'm dealing with a sample demo environment here, and a lot of the start dates of these projects, they do date back a little bit in here. But typically, you'd be starting at, the current quarter and then maybe looking out over the next year, 2 years, depending on what you wanted to analyze in terms of your planning horizon. So I'm going to go first quarter of 2013, and I'm going to go all the way out to the last quarter of 2017.
We time travel.
We did. Well, you definitely want to go into the future, because what you're probably including in this mix are either project proposals, or you have projects that have been planned out over that far. They're going to be multi-year projects. So we definitely want to include that in our analysis here. All right, then in every environment, you're going to have a custom field set up that specifies what role do the individual resources map to in the resource pool. So in this environment, it's called position role. Okay. And then if you did want to filter resources on department or filter by something called RBS, or resource breakdown structure, basically where they are in the reporting structure of your organization, you can do that. I don't want to filter any of my resources, so I'm going to leave that deselected. There's also a setting when you add resources to the team of a project. Okay, you can specify that you're doing so in a proposed manner or in a committed manner. And you can use that also as a toggle here to determine whether or not you're going to include just proposed or just committed or both proposed and committed. So I'll go with proposed and committed. Actually, I'm going to go with the default here, only committed assignments. Okay. All right. And then for the project start and finish dates, I will use whatever is in the project schedule itself or whatever is in what's called a resource plan. Okay, and I'll go with that. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is going to take a look at the prioritization of the projects themselves. So of the 25 projects that were selected, they're showing up on individual rows here. I can see what their scores were against the individual business drivers here. So this kind of gives me one last chance in analysis to kind of put on my my bogus detector. And if I see a project that's extreme all across the board, that doesn't mean that that's inaccurate or somebody's trying to game the system. But I'm certainly going to put that project under a pretty tight microscope before I proceed. Catalog publishing, is that really going to rank extreme in expanding into new markets and segments? And as the portfolio analyst, if I disagree with any of these scores here, I can override the values. I can pull a drop down and change it to something else. It's only going to affect this analysis. It's not going to change the score on that driver itself on that project's strategic impact statement, but it will have an impact on this analysis. Okay. In this case, I'll just leave all of these alone. But this, this shows me how each project, so look at it row by row by row, you would spend some time here, and how it's scored against the individual drivers. Then you get to the overall list, highest priority project, all the way down to lowest priority project. Okay, and the algorithm that it uses was how they scored on this screen against the important drivers all the way down to the less important drivers. And you get a breakdown such as this. So e-commerce portal development obviously scored pretty well against my important drivers. All right, and going all the way down to the bottom, software benchmarking architecture upgrade. If it scored well against any drivers, it certainly didn't score that well against the important drivers. It didn't get much of a boost. It probably has, so if I go back to the previous screen here and I look at that software benchmarking architecture, yeah, so I know that my important drivers are expanding into new markets, and it has a score of none there. And another one is increasing market share in existing markets. It has a score of none there. So the only thing that it scored well against were my lower priority drivers, and that's why it ends up towards the bottom of the list here. All right. Then we have our two dimensions that I mentioned before, analyzing cost and analyzing resources, and here's where we can do our overall analysis. So when you first come in to analyze cost, it's going to actually have all projects selected. So all 25 projects are going to be selected here. It's going to show them in priority order. I can sort and filter on different columns here. Okay, I can also create views, so I can show different information here. I only have a summary view in this demo environment, but you can show different project fields here. It's also going to show me, people in portfolio analysis are familiar with the term efficient frontier. So the efficient frontier curve, basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to get as close to 100% of the strategic value of doing these projects as we can do, given the budget that we have for doing the projects. So if the cost field that I used, which was total cost, okay, it summarizes it for all those selected projects, and it gives me a total here. Now I can hit the modify button and pull other cost fields into it and analyze based on them. All right, but I'm just going to keep this analysis simple. And let's say that, well, okay, this was great. This was kind of like a pie in the sky analysis, but I don't really have $20 million to do all these projects. What I can do is I can drop my total cost here, or whatever field I use. I'm going to drop it down to 15 million, and just so I don't have to type a bunch of zeros, I won't make it even 15 million, but 15.5, pretty close. All right, and when you put a new value in here, what you can hit is recalculate, and you can play around with the what if analysis. So if I do truly only have $15 million to do whatever project I can do, put that figure in, okay, and it's automatically, unless I have some zero cost projects in there, which I don't, it's going to just say, okay, based on, trying to maximize this efficient frontier curve here, I'm going to recommend that you don't do these 4 projects down at actually more than 4. You don't do, so out of 25, now we're down to 19, these 6 projects down below. And the reason for that is, it's not necessarily that they were the lowest priority ones. So I can see Health Assessment Reporting Tool has a 3.76 score, and yet it kept several projects that rank below that. So it's a combination of the prioritization and the cost of the project. I mean, what we're really trying to do here is maximize where we fall on this efficient frontier curve here. So with $15 million, by doing the 19 projects that we have selected, we're still able to get 87% of the strategic benefit by doing those projects. Okay, and what I can also do here is I can keep playing around with dollar figures, and each time I do so, I can do a save as, so that I can compare them against my baseline. So I'm going to call this one 15M, meaning 15 million, and then I can take a look and compare my different baselines together.
Can you override the selection of projects that the analyzer indicates that you should do?
Actually, yeah. So on this analyze cost screen here, so these projects that it did not select, okay, when you set up the analysis itself, now I kind of overlooked that, but when you come into a portfolio analysis, I'm going to bounce over here to another screen, okay, and if I click back on the page where I defined it, at the very bottom, there is this option here, alias force in and force out. So if you did want to override what the analysis is telling you should do and not do, you can allow for force in and force out. And these are based off of what's called a lookup table. So you have to have an administrator create a lookup table and put several choices in that lookup table. And force in criteria could be things like regulatory compliance, internal compliance, maybe CEO pet project or something like that. Or if you wanted to force a project out of the mix, maybe you're forcing it out because you think the driver values are suspect, or it was really just kind of like a WAG. We don't think we quite have the details refined enough, but we did want to include it in the analysis just to see. But we're going to force it back out. Okay, and the way you do that in the analysis itself is you have a little drop down here where you can, if you select the lookup table, then you can actually choose why you're forcing it in or out here. And if you don't, then you can just simply say, well, okay, this router benchmark system, I do want to do that. I want to force it in. So if you make one of those changes, you force a selected project out, or you force a deselected project back in, you're going to want to hit recalculate. And it's going to make changes to that. So when I force one in, it may bring a couple other projects along with it. Another thing that I sort of, I don't really have time to go into every single minute detail of this, but another thing that you can specify when you're setting up the portfolio analysis is if you have project dependencies. So in other words, I could set a dependency. Now, I'm not saying that's why these 2 projects were moved in, but it could potentially be. If when I select the router benchmark system upgrade, I have to do the health assessment reporting tool because it's a dependency of that project, you can set that up in the analysis itself. Okay. All right. So I'm just gonna save this one as well. I didn't change my budget figures, so I'm gonna call this one. I'm still gonna call it 15 mil, but I'm gonna say with the router upgrade. So basically letting me know later on that I forced the router upgrade project back in. Okay. And you can continue with your what if analysis and save as many baselines as you want until you see the list of projects matching the budget you have on this screen. Like I mentioned, though, there is a second dimension to this, which, and frankly, a lot of the clients that we have focus more so on the second dimension, and that is, what's the impact on the resource pool? Do I have enough people in the resource pool to do all of these projects? And when I click on Analyze Resource, it tells me just that. Okay, so it says, okay, based on the time horizon that you did select, which was beginning of 2013 all the way out to the end of 2017, okay, do you have enough people in your resource pool to handle all 25 projects? And apparently I don't. I only have enough people in the resource pool to handle 14, okay, of the projects. Now, why were some of these projects not selected on a resource analysis criteria? To kind of dive into that, what I have to do is I got to use a different view other than the Gantt chart here. The Gantt chart's not going to tell me, why these projects were not selected. It just tells me when they're supposed to start and finish. Okay? But if I switch over to requirements details, that's going to give me a different view of these projects. Okay? And what it's going to show me over a time phase period here is what the requirements of each project are based on the different roles that are included in the project. So apparently in the Dynamics CRM deployment for EMEA, that's a project. In that project, I have defined either generic or named resources, but I have people on the project that align with the analyst role, the developer role, the project manager role, tester, and trainer. Okay. Shared GPS devices for transportation has some of the same roles, but it has some different roles in there as well. Okay. And what I want to do here is I want to figure out why those projects that were not selected were not selected. So if I come over here and click on this highlight deficiencies, it's going to turn red, okay, any roles that have a deficiency and show me in which time period that deficiency exists. So I'm going to collapse the selected ones because I don't care so much about them. I obviously have enough people to do them. But the ones that are not selected, what I can do is I can take a look over here and I can see what role has a deficiency and in which month. So in this case, in the month of April 2015, right now, I'm short on the trainer role. So I don't have enough trainers to handle whatever training needs this project has. Okay, I scroll down to some other projects here. And I can see deficiencies down here in the apparel ERP upgrade. Okay, I've got deficiencies of the tester role, and I've got it over a pretty big time period here. Okay, so if I'm trying to get some of these projects back into the mix, there's basically two things I can do here. Okay, I can either play around with start dates and hopefully get the resource conflicts that I obviously have, get them resolved by maybe pushing a project start date out a little bit, or I can hire internal or external resources. I can hire contractors or I can hire full-time resources to hopefully get me around these shortcomings that I have here. What you can't do is just simply come down here and say, hey, I want to force this one back in. It doesn't allow you to do that because it's saying, no, the reason you can't do this project is because you have a deficiency on the resource side. Okay. However, let me switch back to the Gantt chart here. So it's kind of a minor quirk of the tool, but you get used to it working with it after a while. Anytime you want to play around with the what if figures like recalculate or hire resources, something like that, you always have to switch back to the Gantt chart. Okay, but if I do try to come down here and just say, hey, let's just force this one back in, all right, and recalculate on that. Unless I change some other variables at play here, or really change the factors that are at play here, okay, more often than not, it's not going to be able to move that project in. Usually you'll get an error when you try to do that. Okay. Better approaches to this are, if I come down here, let's say this audit tracking solution. Okay. If I want to do that, but without having necessarily an impact on other projects, because you see what happened here when I force this one in. The only way I can get that in is if I move something else out. Well, maybe what I want to do is I actually want to do all of these projects if at all possible. So, maybe my force in isn't the approach that I want to take. I think I said earlier you can't simply force it in. I mean, I didn't mean you can't use the force in option, but I can't force something in and just add it to the list of projects and keep everything else that was selected still selected. So something has to give here. So a better way would be, let's go with a new start date here, perhaps. So what if I was able to move this project start date out, and I'm just going to arbitrarily pick, what if I move this to January 2017? Okay, so the original start, it shows me, is January 2015. What if we push it out a little bit? Go to January 2017. And if I do that, and I hit recalculate, now this is really just, this is a guess without really analyzing that project that closely. Okay, great. It was a good guess on my part. Okay, so I kind of looked when I was on that requirements details, and when I saw those deficiencies, it did look to me that audit tracking solution only had a deficiency in one role for 1 month. So hopefully moving that out, I mean, I probably didn't have to quite go all the way to January 2017, but, I only have 10 minutes left, and actually I don't have that much time left in the demo. I've got about 5 minutes left, so I got to make some things happen quickly here. In a real portfolio analysis, I would probably do this, maybe a couple months at a time. Move it out a little bit, see if it has an impact. Try a little further, see if it has an impact. Maybe move this one and another project out a little bit. So there's a lot of iterative steps that come into play here. Okay.
And I'm just looking at the screen. What is that commit button up there?
That
sounds
okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, the commit option up here. And this is going to be kind of the last main area that I focus on here. So if let me actually go back to my analyze cost here. All right. Let's say that I did enough of my what-if analysis here with budget and with moving my projects in and out and all that good stuff. And I'm happy with the selection of projects that I have here. I'm happy with where we're falling on the efficient frontier curve. Okay, and I want to say, you know what, I'm sort of committing to doing these projects. What you can do is hit the commit button. Okay, and it doesn't necessarily say, well, okay, now you're doing these projects. I mean, really, what happens when you hit the commit button here is it writes values into a bunch of different project fields, which I'll show you in a second here. And a lot of times what you would do is you would use those values when you're looking at projects and you're managing projects through their life cycle. So in other words, I might only want to look at committed projects when I'm trying to move out of a stage gate, okay, to get a project into, say, the execution phase. If I never ran the project through the portfolio selection process and committed it, then, it's probably not a good idea if I move this project from the planning phase into the execution phase. We haven't determined if we're actually going to be able to do this project. So when you hit that commit button, it writes a bunch of fields. And if I bounce over to the project center here, let me close out of that. If I bounce over to the project center, I actually have a view. So it's not this view, but I have a view in here called the portfolio selection that shows me exactly which fields get written. So this is telling me, now I only committed on the cost side, I didn't commit on the resource side. So that's why the selection for resources, those are all blank. But here I can see which projects were selected, which ones were not selected. Okay, and if I had any that were, say, forced in, I can see the ones that were forced in, also as an option. Plus, if I scroll a little bit to the right here, when did the actual commit take place? Okay, so most of these were done today, so 429, you're seeing 429 in here. Okay, plus if I had also committed on the resource side as well, I would have seen a lot of these schedule dates, okay, have values here as well. I only hit commit on the one, the one half of the analysis, the budget half. If you hit commit on both of them, then these other fields will populate as well. And again, these are useful when you're taking a look at projects that are at a particular phase in their life cycle, and you can use that to determine whether or not you want to move forward with those projects or cancel. The whole purpose of this is there's lots of companies out there that they never cancel projects. They will drag projects through to their completion, kicking and screaming, no matter how poorly the project is performing, how much it's costing to do so. The whole idea here is there are projects that should be canceled. You probably should say, let's cut our losses now. Let's move on to the other projects that are going to benefit us to do, and move forward with a healthy portfolio, healthy selection of projects. Exactly. Okay, so that was a relatively quick walkthrough, and was kind of 30,000-foot view, but hopefully you'll see that at least getting started. It's not too daunting of a task to get in here, build your driver library, build a driver prioritization, and at least start using the portfolio analysis a little bit. It does get relatively nuanced when you have a big resource pool and you're trying to make those projects work based on who you have available in the resource pool. But with time and with effort, you'll be able to utilize this part of Project Server, Project Online, to its full benefit. So let me go back to the slide deck. And
does anybody have any questions for Aaron before we end the webcast today? Feel free to speak up. We're not muted or anything, so.
Yeah, or if you like, you can also use the. There's a little chat window. Yeah, so you click the little thought bubble icon up there in the Join Me. That's the chat window. Okay.
And, you know, I'm just going to talk a little bit about, I talked about project schedulers already, so we can move forward with that.
Okay.
And I will send out the PowerPoint presentation to everybody, so if you have any questions or want to have more information on those, you can have that. And next slide, please.
Sure.
Also talked about support services.
Okay.
Here's our schedule for our webcasts. If you are just scheduled for one, I know some of you are scheduled for all of them. Just let me know when I send out the presentation today. Just let me know and I'll register you for all of them. That way it's on your calendar, and if you can make it, great. If you can't, that's okay too. But again, we are also going to be asking what other topics you'd like to see covered the rest of the year. And next slide. There's a survey. I will send out the survey in an email right after. You should be able to. I don't think that everyone can actually see that link, but I'll send it out in an email. Would love to have you fill out the survey as well. So, does anybody have any questions for Aaron or myself, or do you need any more information on any of our services? Would anyone like to talk about any interesting story related to portfolio analysis that they're currently facing? Any challenges?
Oh, we've got a quiet audience today. Well, tell you what, I will be sticking around here for a little bit. So if you do have any questions or anything, again, feel free to jump in or.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. You did your analysis on cost and resources. Can you just do it on resources only and not cost?
Sure. I mean, you can effectively ignore, let me kind of bounce back and show you something here. In a particular analysis, I want to make one thing clear first. The selection of projects, when you do what-if scenarios on the cost side, that doesn't really have an impact of the projects that are selected on the resource side and vice versa. So, the analyzed cost is telling you specifically from a pure cost perspective which projects can you do and can't you do given the cost figures that you put in. And with the resources, that's based on what you have in your resource pool and what their availability is. You can effectively just go over here. The way I would approach what you're saying is put an astronomically high value over here. Okay, great. We're not really focused. This cost might have been really just a wag or a wild guess, an estimate. So we're not really going to base our criteria on that. I can just simply put a really high value over here, and then everything will be selected, and then really just focus on the analyze resource side of it. So here, all my projects are selected. Okay, so I can do a save on that. I'm just going to call it all projects since it has all projects selected. And then when I go over to my analyze resources, really just focus my energy. Come on, resources page. Really just focus my energy on doing my what if analysis over here as well. And one thing that again, I didn't have quite enough time to show you absolutely everything, but there is the ability to model headcount in here. So I played around with start dates and I used the force in to get a project selected. You can also say, what if we hire a couple full-time people? Or if I go up into the options menu, I can change full-time to just contractors. And what if I throw an extra 75 grand, at this and hit the recalculate button and see if that has an impact on which projects I'm able to do. So either throwing more dollars at it or hiring individuals. Okay, I can see what impact it has. And then there are also reports. There's a hired resources report that if I do that additional what-if analysis, it's going to tell me exactly where I should spend those dollars, or if I'm telling it to hire 3 or 4 people, what people I need to hire and at what cost, okay, and for what time period, okay. Now, what you're
helpful, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Now, what you're seeing here is you would never see this in a realistic one. I mean, the cost of bringing these people on would be a positive number. The reason it's showing 0 here is because in my demo environment, I don't have a rate specified on my tester resource or my SME resource or my project engineer. But if you have, if you have a rate on them, 60 an hour, 75 an hour, 100, then,
Right.
it's going to roll up into what the cost of hiring those people would be.
Makes sense.
Okay?
Okay, thanks.
Sure, my pleasure.
Question.
Any other questions at all?
Yeah, any other questions? And remember, we can demo this for you and your team and cover topics that you would like to see related to Project Server, Project Online, Quick PMO,
Yep.
Quick
So,
PMO for Agile, any of those.
yeah, I just did a specific one for a client last week, and they were specifically looking at using this for their marketing department. So they have non-marketing projects in the portfolio, but marketing wants to kind of be on the vanguard and pilot using the portfolio analysis piece. So I did this demo in a little bit more depth and with a little bit more specificity towards marketing type projects for a customer. So if you feel that your organization could benefit from this, we can set up a little bit more targeted demo of this and dive a little bit further under the hood for you. So just let Nadine know on that.
Yeah, so great. It is 1 o'clock according to my time, and so we're going to call it a day. But Aaron and I will